Okay, hello everyone. So today I'm going to talk about an analysis about arbitrage profits under share sequencing. But before we start, I want to build a common understanding of share sequencing and what it means. And so in the context of this talk, share sequencing will be when an entity or a protocol is taking the responsibility of selecting and ordering transactions for other rollups. So this usually takes the form of this single entity or protocol combining all the transactions from multiple rollups and sequencing them all together as one. There's a few advantages that the proponents of share sequencing claim that this setup brings. Two of them are, first, they say that share sequencing brings better UX for end users because now they can interact with different rollups in a unified system. And secondly, share sequencing can also increase revenue for rollups due to increased or better MEV extraction. And in our case, so in this talk, we're going to focus on the second claim. So we're going to investigate how MEV extraction in rollups is impacted under share sequencing. And to talk about this, first I need to give also a brief introduction on MEV on rollups. There were great talks yesterday, so this will be a bit repeated if you watch them, but I'll do it anyway, so we are all on the same context. And today, MEV on rollups is mostly dominated by arbitrage. And this happens because most rollups don't have a public mempool, and so this is one of the most common strategies. And arbitrage here involves essentially exploiting price mismatches between two exchanges. And usually exchanges that are, of course, trading the same tokens. And these exchanges can be DEXs across different chains. But they can also be a DEX and a centralized exchange such as Binance. And so here we have an example where we have two exchanges with price mismatch on the ETH-USDC token pair. And an arbitrageur can exploit this price mismatch by submitting two independent swaps. So first, we are buying, or the arbitrageur is buying ETH and paying USDC. On the second swap, the arbitrageur is doing the opposite trade, so he's paying ETH and getting USDC back. And here, the amount of ETH is the same. And so at the end, you have a little bit more USDC because the price on exchange B was cheaper than on exchange A. And I must note that while on Ethereum, usually this is done atomically, so you have a single bundle where these swaps are executed and depend upon each other, and so they are essentially using the same tokens in the upward and downwards swap. Usually on rollups, this doesn't happen, and so arbitrageurs need to either hold liquidity on both sides of the swaps, or they need to use bridge, okay? But for the most part, they usually maintain liquidity on both sides of the trade. And so this is just to say, as I was saying before, that at the end, the arbitrageur is extracting a little bit of profit. In this case, it's denominated in USDC, and this profit is simply the difference in liquidity across the two sides of the trade. And because of the price mismatch, he gets a little bit of USDC back. Okay, so now going back to the share sequencing. And how then does this new setup of sequencing impact these arbitrage type trades? And here I'm going to focus on two properties. And within share sequencing, there's tons of different ways of naming these things and different ways of splitting it. So I will just focus on these two properties and give you a brief overview of what I mean by this, okay? And so the first property is atomic execution. And by this, I just mean the property where you can ensure that two transactions across different rollups execute together or not at all. Okay, so if one happens to fail, you can guarantee that the other will revert as well. Okay, so this is what I'm meaning by atomic execution. The other property, which is atomic bridging, is going a little bit further and now is allowing atomic bridge operations. So there's no need to wait multiple blocks. You essentially can, in the same bundle, use tokens from one chain and bridge them to the other. Okay? And this has a huge benefit in arbitrage because it means that now you don't need to hold liquidity on both sides of the swaps. You can just even take a flash loan, do the first swap, bridge, do the second swap, and then repay back the flash loan. And as you can imagine, this atomic bridging is a stronger property, right? And has the potential for more benefit for arbitrageurs. However, this is also more challenging to implement, okay? And so for this work, we decided to actually focus on just atomic execution and understanding the value of this first simpler level of share sequencing, let's say. And I would say atomic bridging is also another interesting thing that we should look at, but I leave it for further work. Okay, so going back to the example we had before, so here we have the same arbitrage. So we have two exchanges, but here I'm assuming that we are arbitraging the same ETH USDC pool on Uniswap, but now across two different rollups. So we are focusing on cross-chain arbitrage. Okay, so we are doing an arbitrage on Arbitrum and OP or Optimism in this case. Okay. And if the arbitrageur wants to exploit this price mismatch, they will submit two independent transactions. So we are assuming that they hold liquidity on these two sides. And they will submit two independent swaps, and they will look the same as we saw before. So on Exchange B, we are swapping USDC with ETH, and on A, ETH USDC. Okay, so in this example, if we assume we don't have atomic execution, the arbitrageur is submitting these two swaps, and one of them can fail. And if one of them fails, the other can go through. There's like no guarantee of both failing at the same time. While on atomic, so under the atomic regime, if the first swap fails, the other will fail as well. So they are failing together. And in our analysis and the results I'm going to show at the end, we will be focusing on the difference in profit of these two regimes. Okay, so the non-atomic regime and the atomic regime. Okay, so we have always these two regimes, and we are computing the difference. Okay, and so we did the model, and we used some assumptions, so it was easy to reason about these things. And in this model, we are assuming that an arbitrageur is submitting a single arbitrage trade, so he's doing two swaps. They are doing the same of arbitraging two different rollups with the same token pair pool. Okay, this pool has the same trading fee. Okay, another assumption is that we are completely ignoring transaction fees, And in reality, we know that transaction fees will likely have an impact on the final results. But at the moment, rollups have really low transaction fees. And also this assumption allows us to have a simpler formula that we can reason with. And this helps as a first step. We are also, as I was saying, we are also assuming that the arbitrageur is holding liquidity on both chains, and he is valuing that liquidity at its own price, which we call P external. And the rationale for this price, you can think of it as, is the price that the arbitrageur either paid for the liquidity he's holding now, or some price that he expects to pay in the future when he settles the liquidity. It's like its own evaluation of how these tokens are worth. And once again, the metric we are interested in this case, is the difference in expected profit of the two regimes. So the atomic regime minus the non-atomic regime. So when this metric is positive, there's a benefit in atomicity. So now looking at the various scenarios, so we have 4 possible scenarios in terms of failure probabilities or failure cases, let's say. So in the first one, both swaps are failing, okay? And in this case, the difference, so our metric of interest is 0, because there's no difference. Both fails at the same time, so there's no difference between atomicity and non-atomicity. On the second one, we have the swap on B failing, the swap on B executing, and the swap on A failing, okay? And in this case, the atomic regime, the profit is 0, because both swaps are being reverted, so the change in liquidity is 0. There's no profit, okay? Either positive or negative. But now, in the regime where there's no atomicity, we have swap B executing. And so there's a change in liquidity on that side of the trade. And that change in liquidity is simply the difference in the ETH tokens purchased minus the USDC tokens that the arbitrageur got back, okay? The third case is also simple. We just have both swaps executing, and the difference in profit is again 0, the same as the first case. And the fourth case is similar to the second, but it's the other way around. Now you have the atomic regime, the profit is 0, but on the non-atomic regime, there's swap A that executes, and so you have to see the difference in liquidity there. And I should note that because we need to compare apples with apples, when we are computing these differences in liquidity, we always need to convert one of the tokens to the other. So in this case, we'd have to convert the value of the ETH tokens into USDC. And so we are using here that price of the arbitrageur, the P external, okay, to do that conversion. So that we can, otherwise we'll be calculating ETH tokens and adding them to USDC tokens, it wouldn't make sense. So far, so good. Okay. So if we now take these 4 scenarios, we can compute the expected difference in profits using the failure probabilities. And after some derivation, we get this nice formula. I won't go over the derivation. If you want, you can check the paper, and we have all the details there. But the interesting thing here is that this final difference in profit essentially depends on 3 things. So first, we have the trade size. The trade size doesn't change whether the difference is positive or negative. So it's not, it doesn't tell you if these, if atomicity is beneficial or not, but it changes how much or the dimension of the profit difference. And usually the trade size depends on the setup of the pools at the moment, so the liquidity in the pools and also the price differences, and this controls this trade size. The second one is the failure probabilities. So here we have for each roll-up, we have a probability of failure, and we are representing it here with these small f's, FA for roll-up A and FB for roll-up B. And then finally, we have these differences between three prices. So the first one is the arbitrageur's price, so P external. And the other two are the prices that the arbitrageur executed on when they were doing the swap. Okay, it's not the price before the swap or after the swap, it's like the actual price that the arbitrageur experienced in their trade. Okay. And so to reason a little bit about this formula, we did some simulations in Python. So essentially here we have three matrices, and they correspond to three different cases of where this arbitrageur price lies in relation to the other two pool prices. And then for each of these three scenarios, we have the metric, so the difference in the two regimes, for different failure probabilities. Okay, so we have the failure probabilities for B on the x-axis and for A on the y-axis. And so if we now focus on the first one, okay, so this is the case where the P external is larger than the pool prices. In this scenario, when the metric is red, it means that the metric is negative, and when it's green, it's positive. So in this red area of the matrix, here we are in the situation where roll-up A is failing more often, on average, than roll-up B. Okay? And so this means, in consequence, that swap B is executing more often, on average. And we can think about what is happening here. So on swap B, the arbitrageur is buying ETH, but the price he's getting in swap B is actually a better price than its own internal price. Okay? And so this means that when swap A is failing, it's better for him to have swap B executing than failing. Okay, so on average, he actually gets a positive profit by having just that leg of the swap executing. And that's why we get the reds. On the other hand, on this lower part, it's the opposite. So we have roll-up A is failing less often, and so the swap B is executing more. Swap A is executing more. And in this case, the arbitrageur is selling ETH, okay, because it's in the other side of the trade. But now we're selling ETH at a worse price than the internal price, right? And so here it generates a profit when, if swap B fails, actually failing swap A is also more profitable, because otherwise you'll get a worse price, okay? And if we look now, I think the other scenario where the price is lower than the two prices is fairly similar, just sort of inverted the relationships. I think the other interesting case is middle price, where it seems like it's always non-beneficial to have the atomic regime. And here, the rationale is very similar as well. So what is happening here now is on this upper part, the logic is exactly the same as the previous scenario. Okay, so we have swap B executing more often, and in that case, the arbitrageur is buying ETH, and the price is better. Okay, but on the lower part, now the difference is that we are still executing A more often, but selling ETH is now happening at the worst price. Okay, because the PX is lower than PA. Okay, so again, we get a net loss. And so the key takeaway of this analysis is that it is not always profitable for an arbitrageur to be in an atomic execution regime. And so this property alone might not be enough to convince rollups to change. And this can be seen in a simple two-token swap. Okay. In addition, in this simple case, the profitability of the atomic regime depends on just two parameters. So the first one is the failure probabilities on each rollup, and the second is the price of the arbitrageur in relation to the price of the pools that he's executing on. So this was a first step into investigating these questions, and so there's tons of future work that we could do. The first one would be to consider transaction fees in the model and seeing how that changes the final results. Our model is also assuming that the liquidity that the arbitrageur is holding is in the native tokens is arbitraging. But we know in reality this doesn't happen. So in reality, arbitrageurs will hold their liquidity in some stable token and then convert it back and forth. And so another extension could be to have that additional conversion and consider that as well. I think it's also very important to study a bit more deeply how prevalent these cases where atomicity is beneficial versus it's not are empirically, okay? So this means calculating or looking into the failure probabilities of different rollups and seeing like where they lie on that matrix that I will show you, that I showed you before, and also comparing pool prices in different rollups and seeing how they fare against a generalized index. And finally, there's the atomic bridging part, which we didn't look into, and I think it's fairly important to also do a similar analysis, but now looking into atomic bridging and trying to understand the actual profit that could be generated there. If you found this interesting, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Telegram. You can also check the paper on archive, and I'm happy to take questions. I don't know if we still have time.
Absolutely, we have time.
Okay.
And you have a bit more time because of the bit rocky beginning. But first of all, a round of applause. It was really interesting. Thank you very much. And now I'm hoping for some great questions.
Thank you. Do you know how often it's the case that we are in this intermediate regime where the prices, the external price is in between?
So that's a good question. We haven't looked into it, but I think it's one of those things we should look together with the failure probabilities to actually see. But I think the hard part there is that you can look into the pool prices and a generalized index and compare it, but in the end, that might not be the price that the arbitrageurs would benefit from. So it's a bit, I think this price external is a bit a theoretical concept, and it's hard to really measure it empirically. But yes, using a generalized index, we could try to have a sense of it.
Is it really possible, like, to have atomic cross-chain swaps? Like,
what do you mean? Do you mean just atomic execution?
In cross-chain, like, how can you guarantee, like on Ethereum, like you have a bundle where you bundle the transactions? Like, how is it possible to do this on rollups?
So if we are thinking just on atomic execution, so I'm not considering bridging, okay?
Sure.
Just atomic execution. The idea is that the share sequencer will have this responsibility of selecting the transactions first, and then running the full nodes of all rollups to verify that these transactions are valid. And
but right now it's not possible, right?
I mean, you could do this. You have some vendors that are already doing this. So you have Espresso Systems, Astria. So and there's I think Astria, I'm not sure if it's still in testnet, but a few of them are in testnet, and one of them, I think it was Astria, was already in production.
Nice. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much again